You think being a good person means putting others first, sacrificing your needs, and seeking approval from everyone around you? Maslow discovered something that contradicts everything society taught you. In his research on self-actualized individuals, he found that those trapped in people-pleasing behaviors never reached the top of the pyramid. They were stuck, psychologically starving, while appearing successful to the outside world. The most shocking part? These good people were actually suffering from a hidden deficiency that Maslow identified as more dangerous than physical hunger. It's a psychological trap that 98% of the population falls into without even realizing it. And the more you try to be good in conventional sense, the deeper you sink into this trap. Not every act of kindness comes from self-actualization. There's a dark difference between genuine compassion and desperate approval-seeking. Maslow observed that many people who appear virtuous are actually operating from the third level of his hierarchy, frantically trying to satisfy their need for love and belonging. These individuals sacrifice their authenticity, suppress their true desires, and mold themselves into whatever shape others expect. They smile when they want to scream. They agree when they want to object. They give when they're already empty. This isn't self-actualization. This is self-abandonment disguised as virtue. What looks like goodness on the surface is actually psychological starvation in action. Real self-actualized people, according to Maslow's research, are often misunderstood as selfish because they transcended the desperate need for external validation. In this video, I'm going to reveal the 5 levels of Maslow's hierarchy and show you exactly how being too good keeps you trapped in the lower stages. You'll discover the 3 psychological signs that Maslow identified in people who mistake approval-seeking for genuine goodness, and why this pattern becomes increasingly dangerous over time. These are insights from humanistic psychology that explain why some of the most beloved people feel the most empty inside. By the end, you'll understand the counterintuitive path Maslow mapped out for true self-actualization and why it requires you to disappoint people. This isn't another self-help video telling you to be nicer or work harder on yourself. This is humanistic psychology applied to a dangerous pattern most people never recognize in themselves. This video is for people who feel exhausted from constantly managing other people's emotions, who built their entire identity around being helpful and accommodating, yet feel a gnawing emptiness that success and approval can't fill. If you've ever felt guilty for having your own needs, or if you've noticed that no amount of validation ever feels like enough, you're about to understand why. But warning, this only works if you're willing to confront an uncomfortable truth about what you've been calling goodness. If you're ready to see your own psychology clearly, keep watching. Think about the last time someone asked something of you that you didn't want to do. Maybe your body tensed. Maybe your mind immediately started calculating how to say yes without resentment. That split second of internal conflict is where your true self died a little. Maslow understood that every time you abandon your authentic response to maintain someone else's approval, you're not climbing the pyramid. You're digging beneath it. The emotional weight of this pattern accumulates silently. You wake up one day having achieved everything society calls success, surrounded by people who love the version of you that you perform for them, and you feel completely hollow. The terrifying part isn't that you've been lying to others. It's that you've forgotten who you actually are underneath all those learned responses. Your identity has become a compilation of other people's expectations, and the real you is buried so deep that accessing it feels like archaeology. This is a psychological danger Maslow warned about. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly erases you while everyone applauds how wonderful you are. Maslow's hierarchy starts at the foundation with physiological needs: food, water, shelter, sleep. Most people understand this level intuitively. Your body demands these things, and you feel the absence immediately. The second level is safety and security, both physical and psychological. You need to feel protected from harm and have some stability in your life. These first 2 levels are about survival, but here's where it gets complex. The third level is love and belonging, the need for connection, intimacy, and social acceptance. This is where the danger begins, because this is where your psychology starts making trades. You begin to learn that acceptance is conditional. You discover that certain behaviors get you included while others get you rejected, and your brain, desperate for connection because humans are tribal creatures, starts automating responses designed to maximize belonging. Watch a child in a dysfunctional family, and you'll see this mechanism forming in real time. They become whatever keeps them safe and loved. They develop a false self. Now scale that forward into adulthood, and you have millions of people who perfected the art of being who others need them to be. Maslow called this a deficiency need because you're trying to fill a gap to avoid the pain of rejection. Everything you do at this level is about not losing connection. But here's the foreshadowing that most people miss. You cannot reach self-actualization while operating from deficiency needs. You cannot become your fullest self while terrified of losing approval. The fourth level is esteem, both self-esteem and the esteem of others. This is where things look like success from the outside. You've achieved recognition. You have status. You've accomplished things that make people respect you. But if you arrived at this level by abandoning your authenticity at level 3, your esteem is built on sand. It's recognition for performance, not for who you actually are. And that creates a sophisticated form of psychological imprisonment. You're successful, but you can't stop performing. You're admired, but you're alone inside that admiration because nobody knows the real you. Maslow saw this pattern repeatedly in his research. High-functioning, accomplished people who were spiritually bankrupt. The fifth level, self-actualization, is where everything inverts. It's no longer about deficiency. It's about growth. It's about becoming. And you simply cannot get there while you're still running the program of being good for approval. Carl Rogers, Maslow's contemporary in humanistic psychology, studied the same phenomenon from a different angle. He called it the gap between the real self and the ideal self. Rogers found that psychological distress intensifies proportionally to the width of that gap. When who you actually are diverges drastically from who you think you should be, you suffer. And society doesn't help, because society rewards conformity. Rogers observed in his clinical practice that the clients who made the most profound transformations were those who stopped trying to be who they should be and started investigating who they actually were. This terrified them initially because it meant risking disapproval. The Eastern philosophical tradition recognized this centuries before Western psychology caught up. Buddhist psychology talks about the false self, the ego construction that believes it is separate and must constantly defend itself to survive. The Taoist concept of Wu Wei, effortless action, describes behavior that flows from authentic nature rather than forced performance. These ancient wisdom traditions understood that trying to be good in the conventional sense, following rules, seeking approval, maintaining appearances, creates internal violence. You're at war with your own nature. Maslow's genius was translating this into a framework Western psychology could study empirically. He spent years researching what he called self-actualizing people, those rare individuals who transcended the approval game. And here's the insider knowledge that most psychology courses skip over. Maslow found that self-actualized people were often considered difficult by conventional standards. They disappointed people regularly. They said no without guilt. They pursued their own values, even when those values contradicted social norms. They had what Maslow called autonomy, a kind of psychological independence that made them immune to manipulation through approval or rejection. This didn't make them cruel or selfish. In fact, Maslow found they had deeper capacity for love and connection than most people. But their love wasn't transactional. It wasn't motivated by fear of abandonment. It came from wholeness, not from emptiness seeking to be filled. Viktor Frankl, another giant in humanistic psychology, observed something similar in concentration camps. He noticed that those who survived with their humanity intact weren't the ones who tried to please their captors or conform to survive. They were the ones who found meaning that transcended their circumstances, who maintained an internal locus of identity that external conditions couldn't destroy. The pattern is consistent across all these frameworks. Psychological health requires you to stop performing goodness and start embodying authenticity. But here's what Maslow never fully explained in his published work, and what his private journals revealed decades later. There's a specific mechanism that keeps people trapped in the third level, and it's more insidious than simple fear of rejection. It's the identity investment you've made in being the good person, the helper, the one people can count on. Your entire self-concept is built around this role. Your ego has merged with it. So when you consider changing, it doesn't feel like character development. It feels like death. Who would you be if you weren't a dependable one? What would your relationships look like if you started honoring your actual boundaries? These questions create existential vertigo because they threaten the only version of yourself you've known. And here's the incomplete information that will make sense later. Maslow discovered that the transition from deficiency needs to growth needs requires something he called a mini-death. The false self has to die, not metaphorically, not gradually. It has to actually collapse. Most people avoid this collapse at all costs because it looks like failure from the outside. It looks like you're becoming selfish or difficult or less good. People who benefited from your false self will absolutely tell you that you're changing for the worse. They're not lying from their perspective. You are becoming worse. For them, you're becoming less manipulable, less available for their convenience, less willing to absorb their emotional labor. But something else is happening simultaneously that Maslow tracked in his research subjects. As the false self dies, something underneath begins to emerge. It's not new. It's not constructed. It's more like remembering than becoming. You start to notice what actually energizes you versus what drains you. You become aware of desires that you've been suppressing for so long you've forgotten they existed. Your voice changes, literally and figuratively. And this emergence process cannot be rushed, cannot be faked, and absolutely cannot happen while you're still prioritizing being perceived as good. The psychological benefits of this transition are almost immediate once you stop resisting it. Remember that internal conflict I mentioned earlier, that split second when someone asks something of you and your body knows the authentic answer, but your mind overrides it? That disappears. Not because you become callous, but because your yes becomes genuine and your no becomes guilt-free. Maslow documented that self-actualized individuals reported dramatically lower anxiety levels, not because their lives became easier, but because they stopped living in contradiction with themselves. Your cognitive load decreases massively when you're not constantly running calculations about how to respond in ways that maintain approval. You have more energy for everything else because you're not bleeding it into impression management. Your relationships transform, though not in the way most people expect. Some relationships end, particularly the ones that were based entirely on your false self's performance. This is painful but necessary. The relationships that remain become deeper and more genuine because now you're actually present in them as yourself rather than as a carefully curated version. You discover that real intimacy was impossible before because intimacy requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires that you have a self to reveal. When you're performing, there's no authentic self available for connection. You've been intimate with people's idea of you, not intimate with people while being yourself. The difference is everything. Maslow found that self-actualized people reported feeling more connected to others despite having fewer relationships, because quality replaced quantity. Your decision-making becomes clearer, because you're no longer filtering every choice through the question of what others will think. You start making decisions based on your actual values, which you can now identify, because you're not drowning them out with shoulds and musts. Your creative capacity expands because creativity requires access to your authentic impulses, and you've been cutting yourself off from those. Even your physical health often improves because the chronic stress of living in contradiction to yourself is one of the most corrosive forces in human psychology. Now here's where everything comes full circle and where the real mystery deepens. Maslow studied self-actualized individuals for decades, documenting their characteristics, trying to understand what made them different. He published his findings, created his hierarchy, and became famous for it. But late in his life, he started writing about something he called transcendence, a level beyond self-actualization that he never fully integrated into his model. He observed that some self-actualized people went through another transformation, one that took them past personal growth into something else entirely. They began experiencing what he called peak experiences more regularly. Moments of intense joy, connection, or understanding that felt like touching something beyond the individual self. And here's the pattern he noticed but never conclusively explained. These people had often gone through extreme loss, not just a mini-death of the false self, but actual devastating life losses that shattered their remaining attachments. It was as if self-actualization prepared them to lose everything and somehow become more whole in that loss. This is the aspect of Maslow's work that psychology tends to ignore because it's uncomfortable. The implication is that true psychological development never ends, that even self-actualization might just be another stage before something more profound. But you can't skip stages. You can't transcend what you haven't integrated. Which brings us back to the danger of being too good. If you're trapped in approval seeking, you're not just failing to self-actualize. You're also preventing every stage beyond that. You're psychologically frozen, and time is passing. Years of your life are being consumed by a performance that's keeping you from the only thing that actually matters, becoming who you actually are. So what's the first step? It's simpler than you think, but harder than you imagine. Start noticing the gap between your automatic response and your authentic response. When someone makes a request, feel what your body wants to say before your mind edits it. Don't act on it yet. Just notice. Practice that awareness for 1 week, and you'll begin to see the scope of the pattern. You'll realize how rarely your authentic self gets to speak. That awareness alone begins the process. But I need to tell you something Maslow warned about that nobody talks about. Once you start waking up to your own inauthenticity, you can't go back to sleep. It's not a reversible process. The performance that used to be automatic becomes conscious, and conscious performance is exhausting in a different way. This creates a crisis point that many people don't anticipate. You're too aware to continue performing, but not yet courageous enough to stop. That's the moment when most people either make the leap or double down on the false self. If you watch this far, if these ideas are resonating, you're probably closer to that moment than you realize. The question isn't whether you'll face it. The question is what you'll do when you do. In the next video, I'm going to reveal Maslow's unpublished criteria for recognizing whether you're actually ready for self-actualization or if you're still too attached to being good. Until then, pay attention to your automatic responses. The truth about who you are is hiding in the gap between what you say and what you feel. Click subscribe if you want to understand the rest of the hierarchy that psychology forgot to teach you.